White Stripes, the great Jack White, on the basketball show this morning on Sports 1440. Ryan, let's take a look at the poll and see what people are thinking about the NBA Finals matchups.
I actually realize now, a couple people correct me in the comments. I put the Lakers 3 times. So that's not good. I put Lakers versus Thunder, and that's not even possible. So that's on me. But it's supposed to be Celtics versus Thunder. Anyways, that does not lead anyway. So Cavs versus Thunder is actually what 41.7% of people are saying.
Great.
And Cavs versus Thunder would be an interesting final. I think the NBA might prefer Lakers versus Celtics for the markets, and that's second place, 29.2. And then the Celtics versus Thunder is third with 20.38% of the vote. I think Cavs versus Lakers is 8.3% of the vote at the bottom.
Well, the Cavaliers are making a legitimate run in earning that particular kind of accolade from our listeners. And again, kudos to our listeners, because we all remember now that recently the Cavs thumped the Celtics twice in head-to-heads, home and homes. And the Cavs now winners of 13 straight, really having an ongoing season that I think continues to surprise and impress everybody. I was thinking about this when you get to the playoffs. Let's say it's the Cavs and the Celtics in a 7-game Eastern Conference final. Over 7 games, this is where the rubber will hit the road. Over 7 games with the outstanding defensive backcourt, if they're healthy, of Drew Holiday and Derek White in Boston. Does that give them enough of a small edge with the rest of the talent that Boston has? And again, this is contingent. Is Porzingis healthy? Injuries are going to tell the tale for every team. But does that give them enough of a slight advantage to be able to, with their championship experience, and we'll go back to the comments by our guest, Tori, talking about the first time her ladies on the Kings team had been in a playoff environment, and it's a whole different deal. 7-game series, whole different deal. What do you think, Ryan? Does Cleveland have enough to overcome Boston's championship pedigree and their great defensive backcourt?
I would say that the Celtics still win, but I don't think it's because of the pedigree. It is prevalent. Donovan Mitchell has some playoff experience, but not to the same extent as Tatum and Brown and the Celtics in general. I think Tatum's been deep in the playoffs every year he's been in the league. Because when he joined, it was Kyrie and co, right? And they lost in the second round of the Raptors. And every single year they go to the conference finals, or they go to the finals and lose or win like they did last year. So that is prevalent. That's a great point. However, I just think they're a better team than the Cavs are come playoff time. The Cavs do feel like they have something built for the playoffs. As you mentioned, defense is so important in the playoffs because everything's so much tighter. And they have that front court of Mobley and Jared Allen. I was mentioning that defensive stat earlier where Luka was second in defensive rating. I think first one makes more sense probably to most fans. Jared Allen's first in defensive rating. And I think that defensive front court and plus just the compete that they've proven this season, I think drives the Celtics to 6 or 7. I do think the Celtics eventually come out on top.
Interesting, and you very well could be right. We're all, of course, all speculating, but Cleveland is a great defensive team, and what the Celtics may have a slight edge on defensively in the backcourt, I wonder about the Cavaliers having an advantage in the front court with the bigs.
It depends on Kristaps, as you mentioned. Eh?
Yeah, it really does. It really does. But that combination of bigs of Allen and Mobley is really interesting. And then I forget the fella's name that was traded from
DeAndre Hunter.
Yeah, like Hunter giving that long wing defender, he really bothers Jaylen Brown. Like, he bothers him.
Yeah, I don't blame you for getting, just quick interjection, that I don't blame you for getting DeAndre Hunter. For my head, the Hawks and Cavaliers are synonymous. Like, I sometimes confuse which team is what. So DeAndre Hunter moving, it felt like a lateral move in my head, like team-wise.
Yeah.
But obviously not actual 6-team success-wise.
Well, I mean, manna from heaven for him. But it's really interesting because I have to say, it's good. I'm excited about the Eastern Conference playoffs. We've talked on this show many times. The Eastern Conference is not the Western Conference in terms of depth. But boy, the top 4 teams are compelling in the East. And now when you've got teams like the Cavs emerging the way they have, it really is going to shake it up. I think everybody thought maybe this was the start of a Celtics dynasty with their finally breaking through last year. They've taken years, to get to this particular point. But I think now with the Cavaliers' historic season, it's unbelievable what they're doing and the way they're going about it, that it's just going to shape things up in the playoffs in a real fascinating way. And then in the West, OKC, of course, like we've all talked about, is OKC built to win in the playoffs? And there are detractors, bright guys in particular in the basketball media, that do not think that necessarily how Oklahoma City plays will translate as well in the playoffs. And here's one reason they may be right, and that is, what will defenses be able to do with Gilgeous-Alexander in the playoffs to cut down on his efficiencies? Because like I mentioned the other night when I watched him in the game against the Knicks, he was like, not the Knicks. I'm drawing a blank. Who he was cutting to shreds. He's like a knife through butter, hot knife through butter.
I'm going to read who they played recently. They played the Blazers, the Grizzlies, the Rockets.
Grizzlies.
Okay.
Yeah, it was the Grizzlies. And the Grizzlies are a good defensive team. He just carved them apart. They could do literally nothing with him. Now, when the playoffs come and you've got 7 games and you've got game in and game out preparation to not only set your defensive strategy at the beginning of the series, but tweak it as the series goes on, everything becomes, what do you take away from Gilgeous-Alexander? And the thing he has going for him is his game is so diverse. It's so complete that if you take one thing away from him, he'll beat you with another.
And his teammates aren't bad either.
His teammates are very good. They're very, very good. Are they good enough if Gilgeous-Alexander isn't getting 35 to make up that difference?
It's if I'm an opposing team in the first round of the playoffs, you know what tape I study? The USA versus Canada tape. Shea did not play super well against the States. Granted, it's the States are a ridiculous super team, but I would take certain defensive aspects that Team USA used against Shea to shut Canada down and beat Canada, unfortunately, very handily. And I think that's a good idea for the first round of the playoffs.
It's a great idea. The difference in the big asterisk in that is that it's FIBA rules, and you can stand in the middle.
True, but maybe there's a couple things you could steal from.
100%. No, what's going to be happening is everybody's going to be scouring every bit of tape to find any way that you can slow Shai Gilgeous-Alexander down, because right now nobody's been able to figure this out at all.
It also puts in perspective the OKC record 52-11, Cleveland 53-10. It puts in perspective just how ridiculous the 73-9 season of the Warriors and the 72-10 season the Bulls had. There's still 20 games left, and they already have more losses than both those teams did.
Right, and they're having phenomenal.
And they're incredible. Like, we're just they are well above everybody. Like, the Thunder are 11 games ahead of the Lakers. The Cavs are 8 games ahead of the Celtics, and the Celtics are 45-18. Right?
No, absolutely. No, I mean, we've talked, it's hard not to talk about this every week in detail, because every week they give you reasons to discuss what they're doing, because it's just so complete. Like Cleveland continuing just to beat everybody. And by everybody, that means top tier teams as well as the weak sisters that you support.
Handily, like taking care of top teams handily.
Yeah.
I will say they only beat the Hornets by 1 last night.
Right.
But
right. Every dog has its day.
Exactly. And they still won. Like, that's what matters, right?
Well, right. I mean, that would have been a perfect opportunity for people to go, aha, see, they can be had. The Hornets of all teams. And by the way, last night's game against Utah with the Raptors, hideous to watch. Absolutely hideous.
The Raptors are like it was ethical tanking before, where they'd lose tight games, but now it's like blatantly just taking their guys out in close games and like, you know what, Jacoby Walter, go for it.
This is what's I find offensive that's going on in the league. We touched on it in the first segment. People pay a lot of money. These dudes are getting paid ridiculous sums of money. They're being treated like they're junior high school kids. You're sitting Jakob Poeltl out because you want him to rest. You're resting R.J. Barrett? Are you kidding me? You don't rest people in the NBA when you've got hardworking people walking through the door spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars to sit in the seats so you can run an intramural game across the league. I'm not just picking on the Raptors. And by the way, Talk about two ugly games. Raptors, Utah, Raptors, Washington tonight. My God, that's just ridiculous. Yep. How bad those teams are. But you're right, ethical tanking. Tanking's tanking. To me, there's no ethics in Boston. I was recently reading a graphic of it's a bit of an unfair comparison, but I love old school, new school comparisons anyway. But it was John Stockton versus, I think it was Magic Johnson. And Magic played every time he could. Magic played a lot. I mean, he had to be really hurt not to play. But you talk about an Iron Man with Stockton. When you look at look up right now how many 82-game seasons John Stockton played. It's ridiculous.
Every single season except for 3 seasons, and he played 19 years. He had 16 out of 19 seasons. He played every single regular season game.
And you know what? He won every wind sprint in practice through his entire career. Validated by Rick Majerus, the Utah University coach, who coached in Salt Lake City and would always be at the Utah Jazz practices with Jerry Sloan. And he said, verified, Stockton won every wind sprint. And I saw a great, there was a guy, what was his name? Maxwell, that played for the Houston Rockets during their championship era. And it's a profane-laden podcast. I mean,
Vernon Maxwell?
Yeah, Vernon Maxwell. Yeah, profane-laden, just absolutely filled with profanities. But they asked him about John Stockton, and he said he was the dirtiest player he ever played against. He said he has that choir boy accountant look, but he was filthy. And they showed some of the highlights of him up close and how he would tuck his elbow under, pull guys down by their shorts. Best screening guard ever in the history of the NBA. He set real screens all the time. Tough competitor.
Probably a little dirty on the screens too, maybe.
Of course. But it's the NBA. And you know how Stockton...
In the 80s and 90s too.
In the 80s and 90s. You know how Stockton negotiated his contracts? Walked into the owner's office by himself and came out in half an hour with a deal. And he always said, I'm going to make more money than I'll ever spend anyway. I'm not worried about it.
To put in perspective his dominance, he averaged double-digit assists from the time my parents were 9 until I was 3. How about that?
That's a great stat. That's tremendous. His assist record never will be touched. Never.
Steals record, too.
Steals record, never going to be touched. Like the consistency of John Stockton can't be overstated. Like I remember back to the Dream Team, the controversy of choosing Stockton over Isaiah Thomas. And, I mean, you could make a case for Isaiah Thomas. He was a great player, 2-time NBA champion with the Detroit Pistons. Unfortunately, a guy named Michael Jordan didn't like him. Seems to have had some impact on that. But
unfortunately for John Stockton, he played in the era of Michael Jordan. That results in no winning.
No winning. And times, especially the second championship where Jordan hit the big shot over Brian Russell. Oh, and by the way, I've got a Brian Russell story. For people who don't know, there's a famous shot where a sequence, and if you go on YouTube, where Jordan steals the ball from Karl Malone. I think the score was tied. Maybe they were down 1. But he steals the ball from Karl Malone, goes down, does a crossover on the Utah guard, Brian Russell, and throws his right. When he crosses over, he throws his hand out, and it looks like he shoves Brian Russell. But no foul is called, and then Jordan hit bottom of the net 15-footer to win the game. And when we had the Edmonton Energy, we played a team out of Los Angeles. That was a pro team that we had from 2008 to 2012 here in Edmonton. And the Energy played an L.A. team, and Brian Russell was on that team, so I had a chance to chat with him after. And I said, so, Brian, did Jordan push you? And he, again, I won't repeat because of the profanity he used, but in essence, he said, absolutely. That was a push. That was an offensive foul. But historically, another one of the great moments in history. So
a quick text from the real Duke. He just texted, all he had to say was Cornbread Maxwell, and that's speaking of Rockets, he played for the Rockets for a year and a half, but obviously Boston's what Cedric Cornbread Maxwell is known for.
Absolutely. Cornbread Maxwell, he has some great stories about Larry Bird, particularly when Bird came into the league, that he thought, here's this guy, white guy that's going to come in. We're just going to eat him alive, And he said in the first practice, he said, no, this is a different deal.
Piece of trivia for you. what was the third team he played for half a season? Or a season and a half? Do you remember?
For Maxwell?
He played for Boston forever, and then he went in 85-86. He went to a team, but then got traded the next year. LA Clippers.
Okay, I would have never guessed that in a million years. I would have never guessed that. But Cornbread Maxwell, I mean, his humor, he was a great contributor to the Celtics. The first championship they had with Bird, he was gone by the time they had the second championship. But Cornbread was just. He was a real contributor. Before we go to break, I want to just touch on a couple of what I would call personal conversations that have taken place recently. One was Draymond Green has his own self-important podcast. By the way, I heard, and he came out with a rumor about Karl Anthony Towns not wanting to play Golden State because he was frightened of or had bad feelings towards Jimmy Butler from their time in Minnesota. Boy, when I said Minnesota, it sounds, you can tell I'm from the Midwest U.S. in the way I pronounce that. But by the time, but what turned out is that Towns was going to a funeral of a very close friend of his family's. So the media has been outraged at Draymond Green's making that kind of gossip statement in a derogatory way. And this to me should be the outcome of that. Apparently, Draymond has some sort of contract with, I think it's TNT, and they're saying he should be gone. Absolutely, he should be gone. Number one, he should never be on there. I think he's terrible. I can't stand listening to Draymond Green. But he should not be able to continue because only a serious journalist should be there. Even if you're a basketball commentator, you should be there. And for him to talk about that and then talk about it in a somewhat apologetic way, but then talk about we got to get back on.
Sorry, but no, yeah, sorry, you can't put on a sorry.
Yeah, I heard
just
it from
say sorry.
Someone.
It's a terrible tragedy. You just got to acknowledge it and say my bad.
And I think he probably will when he sees him next because he knows he's being roasted in the media. But the other one before we go to break was, did you hear Charles Barkley's diatribe against the other group of commentators at ESPN? Like, oh God, what's his name? The big guy. Geez, come on, man. I'll think of it in just a second. I can't believe I can't remember. This is terrible journalism on my part. But Barkley just came out and said, "What a bunch of idiots." And he said, "You listen to these. I mean, you couldn't be more direct and more moronic about this. Could you look up on the NBA?" Group, like I should know this right off the top of my head.
I have not heard. So Charles Barkley on what was the other group he talked about?
It's the guy played for OKC, played for Boston, big burly guy.
Oh, Kendrick Perkins.
Kendrick Perkins. He just ripped Perkins. Absolutely ripped.
Yeah.
And Perkins kind of challenged him on social media. And next year, Barkley and the whole crew from TNT are going to move over to ESPN. So Barkley's final statement is, "I guess next year I'll be one of the idiots." But, like one of the things I love about Barkley is he's completely unfiltered, but a lot of times his commentary, it cuts to the bone, but when you listen to it, you go, you know what? He's not just into hot takes. That's what I like about Barkley. He says what he thinks, but he's not saying it to get a rise like a Colin Cowherd would be. Like a lot of the sports broadcasters that are out there that are just it seems like they're just trying to goad people with hot takes. Barkley doesn't do that. Barkley's a Hall of Fame player, Olympic gold medalist.
Stole an MVP from Jordan. That's impressive.
Yeah, it is impressive. Highly controversial. It's kind of like the Jordan fatigue syndrome of let's give it to somebody else this year. And Barkley had an MVP-worthy season, but Jordan had a better season. I think that would have been
a quick point on the Kendrick Perkins thing. I love it when people bash on him fairly often, and sometimes it's funny. Kendrick Perkins tweeted out that Russell Westbrook was the best player ever put on an OKC jersey, and he said KD in that same Twitter chain. He said KD lost in the second round without Russ when I was there. So what does that mean? And Kevin Durant replied with, "Yeah, and our starting center Kendrick Perkins averaged a whopping 2 and 3 during that series. He played hard though, champ."
Good comeback by KD, by Durant, because Perkins was a bruiser. That there's no doubt about it. But he was one of those guys that was just kind of a mountain guy, but not a finesse guy. Hustle, hardworking guy. He's carved out a really nice niche in broadcasting. Overall, I like Kendrick Perkins, because he is, he's a guy that, when you listen to him, because he played in the league, you're going to have a response to him, like or hate. You're going to respond to Kendrick Perkins. We're going to take a break right now. When we come back, we're going to talk old school. We're going to talk a bit about Bill Russell. And then I've got a couple of other stories that I think you might find very interesting. So join us for our last segment on the Basketball Show on your sports leader, Sports 1440. Welcome back to the Basketball Show. Paul Sir, Ryan Reed, wrapping things up this week. First of all, be aware of some upcoming games that are really exciting in the NBA. Number one tonight, LA Lakers, Boston Celtics. That is going to be fun. Seeing Luka.
Potential finals preview,
Potential finals preview. The storied rivalry in NBA history, bar
You've
none.
probably watched, I'd be curious how many times you've watched a Lakers-Celtics game in your life.
A lot. But there again, one of the great things about my stage of life, I watched Jerry West. I watched Elgin Baylor. I watched Bill Russell. I watched Hondo Havlicek.
What would be the best era for the Lakers-Celtics rivalry? Was it Magic Bird? Probably, right? Or no?
Oh, yeah. I mean, in terms of quality of play, drama, personalities, oh, my gosh.
Does this have a chance in the next couple of years to top that with Luka coming up facing Tatum, let's say in like 4 or 5 years when they've played each other more? Does it have a chance to touch that Bird-Magic rivalry, or is that just unprecedented and untouchable?
I don't know that. There again, you're talking, this is where eras becomes the issue. For me, it would be hard to top the drama, but that was at a whole different time in my life. I mean, I was in my 20s, and it was just a whole thing. The NBA was nothing like it is today in terms of saturation in the media. So does it have a chance? Absolutely. I mean, these guys are phenomenal. And so the ability, or not the capability of this turning into an epic rivalry, absolutely there. And to have a shot at a sampling of what it could look like with Luka and LeBron squaring off against Tatum, Brown, and the Celtics, defending champions, it's going to be a lot of fun. Add into that this week, tomorrow and Thursday, the Thunder and the Nuggets. So you're going to see the guys we spent a lot of time talking about, not just this week, but all the weeks leading up to it. The great 3-time MVP Nikola Jokic against Gilgeous-Alexander and his magnificent season. It's seeing them twice this week. It's going to tell a lot of stories. You talked about those odds earlier on, Ryan, about how they're going to shift. They could really shift around this week depending on the success of one or both of these players and what they're actually able to accomplish.
Or
on the
Giannis
court.
goes nuclear still, and maybe he gets like a plus. His odds are very far, but
yeah, absolutely, they're very far. But what a shame that they are very far, because you've got this magnificent season, and him
31, 12, and 6. That's legitimate.
That's unbelievable. 31, 12, and 6. And I mean, and on the defensive end of the court, the prowess that he brings, and the fact that single-handedly, again, like Jokic, single-handedly, he makes that team competitive. He may be even more important to Milwaukee with their talent pool than Jokic is, because Jokic has some guys to pass to, more guys to pass to than Giannis. To be fair,
Damian Lillard isn't that bad.
He's not a bad guy. He's not a bad
I do agree.
team.
The depth for the Nuggets is
I'm just
way
talking
better.
depth.
But,
I mean,
yeah. But I'd take Damian over Jamal Murray.
Yeah.
Straight up.
Well, yeah,
Okay,
I would too.
okay.
Yeah, I would too. I
guess
mean,
Jamal's an NBA champion. Damian's never been an NBA champ.
Yeah, that's Portland. Now Milwaukee, and they had injuries last year where Giannis wasn't in the playoffs in his first year with the Bucks. That isn't going to happen. If Giannis isn't there and isn't healthy, the Bucks don't have any kind of chance to win a 7-game series in the playoffs, much less a championship. Going to go old school right now. Last week we remembered Pistol Pete Maravich and his impact on the creativity of the game. I'm going to talk today about Bill Russell. Russell won 2 NCAA championships at the University of San Francisco, gold medal or gold medals for the U.S. in the Olympics, and then went on to win 11 NBA championships in 13 years, the last 2 when he was the player coach. So here's a guy in that era as the player coach in his mid-30s and they win a championship. And not only did they win a championship, their last championship with Russell was in 1969 against Wilt Chamberlain, Elgin Baylor, and Jerry West. During the year, the Celtics finished fourth in the league, 48-34. I remember it like it was yesterday. And then they go on to beat the Lakers 108-107 in Game 7. Unbelievable. Talk about willing your way to a championship. And there was one shot in that event that stands out, and it was by a guard named Sam Jones, who's a Hall of Famer as well. Was with Russell, I believe, at the University of San Francisco, but also was with Russell for all or most of the championships. He took a shot to win the game, and it hit below the front of the rim, and I kid you not, because if you'll Google it, you'll see it hits below the front of the rim. Like half the ball's below the rim. Somehow the ball wills its way over the rim for the Celtics to win the game. And they find a way to defeat this absolutely stacked team in L.A. Lakers, within a year or two, won a championship as well, the only championship for Jerry West. But under Bill Russell, like if you watch film of Bill Russell, and I've seen some good film lately of the old school, you'll look at him and go, he couldn't play today. Like heck, he couldn't play today. With today's training, with today's technology, with today's strength and conditioning, Bill Russell would be a force.
And you can't teach his mindset either. He was a winner every single time, no matter what. Again, if you look at his stats, they don't pop off the page. Well, rebounds do, but points-wise, he was always a late teens kind of scoring guy.
Absolutely.
But he had 5 MVPs. He won 11 championships, as you said, and he had 23 rebounds a game. Like, he's doing everything there is to win, and that's why he's over Wilt Chamberlain by so many people.
Well, he is. And did he ever stop Wilt one-on-one? Absolutely not. Wilt could score on Bill, but Russell always said this, and this is, to me, the genius of Bill Russell, and what I love about this is at the infancy of the thinking process of the game of basketball. He said, I'll play Wilt one-on-one. I won't stop him, but don't let him beat us with his assists. He said, Wilt's going to get his. Don't let the others play off Wilt and get theirs. We'll shut everybody else down and let Wilt go to town. And that was really the start of this notion that you can't win a championship with a dominant player who leads the league in scoring, that you have to have more around him. Jordan really, I think, is the only player who's defied that to a certain extent. And even then, he had Scottie Pippen, another, top 50 player with him that led them to the championships. But Bill Russell, now here's the greatest thing about Bill Russell, though. I was reading an article about Russell winning his first NBA championship, coming back to Boston, and not being able to be served in a restaurant because of the racism in Boston. When Bill Russell was a ferocious advocate for equality. He refused to play at certain times during his career. He appeared before Congress. And that all came from his father. And his father owned a garage and was a mechanic when Russell was growing up. And he taught Russell to stand up for himself and character above all else. And Bill Russell was a man of character. He also was a man of hard feelings and hurt feelings, because when he was retiring in his last game in Boston Garden to a standing ovation, Bill Russell did not get up and acknowledge the crowd. And the reason was he had faced so much racism. He tried to buy a house in Boston, couldn't buy a house in certain neighborhoods. Came from a very different era. But you talk about pioneer, you talk about strength of character, Bill Russell was that guy.
He inspired a generation of athletes, of black athletes, of African-American athletes. And it reminds me of story, just a quick introduction, Tiger Woods, who's
100%.
a huge, Tiger Woods, Bill Russell's a huge hero of Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods one time was denied access to a clubhouse at a golf course, and his famous line was, "Where's the first tee and what's the course record?" And it's Bill Russell's inspiring athletes across sports, and I think that's what's so important, what the legacy was, and that's why his numbers retired league wide.
Oh, league wide, the MVP in the NBA Finals is Bill Russell.
Because he won a lot, or how many? Was it 11 Finals MVPs he had? Did he win every time?
That I don't remember.
Okay,
that I don't remember. I wouldn't doubt it, but I can't say for sure. But Bill Russell, he was an absolute icon of a man, a mountain of a man. And another great thing I can't remember what the reason was, but he came out and made a presentation. I believe it was to Shaq, Alonzo Mourning, Dikembe Mutombo, and one other great, Patrick Ewing. And he came out and he stopped and he pointed at each of them very deliberately. Boom, 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 boom. Stood up to the mic and he said, I would have kicked all of your asses.
He's probably right, I'm afraid, right?
He was a mountain of a human being in his strength of character. It's interesting you mentioned Tiger Woods, because when you think back of the impact that Tiger Woods had on golf, many people have drawn the comparison to the impact that Caitlin Clark has had on women's basketball at the NCAA and WNBA levels. And it's really unfortunate that recently Caitlin Clark has once again come under criticism from some very prominent names in women's basketball, singling out her fans as being, let's just say, less than gracious. And I won't go into that part of it today. All Caitlin Clark has done is worked hard. Every time confronted with some controversial comment, some derogatory comment, heck, getting knocked down in the league unnecessarily, unfairly, and overly roughly, she's always responded with class and character, which she continues to do to this date. I really hope at this time when we're celebrating, women in all aspects of life, but women in sport in particular, that the people leveling these unfounded negative comments towards Caitlin Clark get their act together, stop being jealous, taking cheap shots, and rather embrace the wave that's being created and help further the cause of women in sport, not deride it and bring it down because of cheap, petty comments. That would be my one statement I would make. And Jason Whitlock, who's a guy I like listening to a lot. If you Google him, he has quite a strong opinion on how Caitlin Clark's being treated by some of her peers. And like he said, it's just unfortunate because it slows the progress down. It doesn't speed it up. March Madness is here. The insanity begins. There are conference championships all over the place. One of them is a small league, the Summit League. Teams like North and South Dakota State play in the Summit League. One of the newest member of the Summit League is out of St. Paul, Minnesota, St. Thomas University. There was a great write-up today in the New York Times about the journey from Division III in St. Thomas into not just Division I basketball, but everything that's gone on around it. Next weekend, we're going to talk about St. Thomas University because I think there's a lot of lessons that correlate to Canadian basketball as well. Ryan, this has been a lot of fun today. Thanks so much.
We touched on a lot of different things. We got Tiger Woods mentioned. We talked about Bill Russell. We had some great interviews. I think we touched on everything we need to touch on here. It's a great show.
Great show. Great opportunity. What makes it so great, though, is you that take the time to listen to us. Thank you so much for joining us today. As I do every week, I remember my son, Ben, who passed away way too young. Be kind to those you love, but also be kind to those who need our love the most. And that could be in the most unlikely spot, but always be kind to each other. Have a great week on and off the court. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Basketball Show on your sports leader, Sports 1440. We'll see you next Saturday.